Hello, beautiful middle people. Hello, beautiful people online.
Hello, everybody.
Hey.
Peace be unto you.
And also with you. If you're in the social hall, whenever you're ready to make your way in, just come down the side aisles. Just don't walk across the front, okay? You're welcome to come in. We'd love to have you. Just walk down the side aisle and make your way around. That'd be great. I don't know that Ruby needs introducing, but I want to say something about her for a second anyway. There is a palpable and unusual strength in Ruby. I don't know if she would say it's unusual, but I think it's unusual for our times. Something like resilience and kindness, a social critique that is always given in love, and a full force belief that people can be better, different. That, to me, is the stuff hope is made of. So I would say Ruby is one of our elders, an icon in the movement, but also an ambassador for hope. And I am thrilled that she calls Middle Church her church, and I'm thrilled that she'd be here with us today. So another hand for Ruby.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we're doing a thing. We're doing this teach-in, but it's also our Woman Talk God podcast, a podcast where we talk about all things God and faith and movement building from a source of revolutionary love. So someday this will be rebroadcast, and that's what people will think they're listening to. We want to have a conversation, and we want to invite you into the conversation. So we're going to do a bit and then ask for some Q&A. And then we'll do a bit, and we'll ask for some Q&A. Does that feel good? You're going to say we can hear you, and I'm going to say yes, we can, but please use a mic. So when you get ready to talk, if you'll go to the mic, that would be awesome. And say your name, so we can just know that as well. Does that feel good, Ruby?
That's good.
Awesome. So, we are here a couple of days after what would have been Martin Luther King Jr.'s 91st birthday. We are here on the precipice of something wild in our nation. But I wonder if the first things we could talk about would be lessons from that community that held Dr. King and you. What are some of the lessons from King, that community, that you want to share with us today?
First of all, I would like to invite each of you to go on an inner journey. Because to talk about King's work is first and foremost a spiritual project. King dealt with the matters of the soul. He came to redeem the souls of America from the soul murder and the assassination of the guardians of whiteness against the souls of everyone in society by reducing us to simply one identity, which is skin. There's nothing in skin. There's ethnicity, there's sexuality, there's gender, there's religion, but skin is nothing. And so do you really think that Rosa Parks and those gallant ordinary black people who were maids and janitors, do you think they sat down on the bus simply to ride the bus? Do you think they had a boycott simply because they wanted to ride on the bus? It was first and foremost when they said, "I will not be treated this way again." It was an assertion of freedom. It was a declaration of independence. It was a spiritual declaration of claiming their space in creation, not the space that the empire had allocated them, but their place in God's creation. It was a spiritual assertion. And do you think that they were boycotting simply to change the position of black people in society? They were boycotting to shift the center of 400 years of gravity in the hearts of white Southerners. They did not see white Southerners because they understood they were in direct opposition to the vision of the world, where empires materialized existence, and told us that the materialization of our existence is the ultimate expression of a good life. Not our inner consciousness, not our inner lives, by telling us that what we own, what we possess, and what we consume encourages us to consume life rather than live life. Let's just take that in for a moment. To be consumers of their stories and believe that it's our stories. So it's important to understand that once the empire convinces you that you are privileged to be reduced to skin and to have your identity be merely what you possess and what you own and the power that you carry out, then they have replaced the presence of God in your life, because they become the benefactors. They become the people that you go to for your nutriments in life. By reducing you to skin and recreating you in your own image, in their image, they have become God. So first and foremost, the Southern Freedom Movement was a spiritual movement that dealt with idolatry, that reasserted the fundamental universal truth that there is but one God.
Right.
And that is the God that we will bow down and worship, not white men, not the enslavers. And so it was a call to change. So what the Southern Freedom Movement, we called it the Southern Freedom Movement because it removed everyone out of the dungeons of moral nihilism and gave each of us an open door to a beloved community and to a Pentecost moment.
Ruby, that
I'm sorry, I got on a tear.
no, that was a good tear. What? No. I just wanted to join you on that. That's awesome. I think when you're saying that the sort of baseline sin or broken place is idolatry in that moment.
Yes.
I say we make whiteness a god. Whiteness becomes the god.
Yes.
For white people too, right? In other words, the Southern Freedom Movement seeks to redeem the white soul and the black soul.
Yes, it was a
Can you say
spiritual
more about
movement
that?
for all of us.
Right.
And it also was predicated on revolutionary love. Because black people being enslaved, black people being the objects of so much vitriolic hatred, understood that hatred demeaned and diminished the person who hated. And they did not want to be small in spirit. And so they were deeply moved by the cry of the psalmist that said, "Oh God, give me a clean heart. Give me a clean inside." So they sealed off their inner lives. And they said, "I love everybody, I love everybody, I love everybody in my heart. And let me tell you, you can't make me hate you because I control my inner life. You might have my body in chains, but you cannot enchain my spirit." And that is what, how many of you saw Harriet Tubman? Then I'll be quiet.
No, you won't. I hope not.
Harriet Tubman was part of the first mass movement, spiritual movement of black people in this country. It was a runaway movement of a community of enslaved people. And their eyes were watching whom, as Jordan Neil Hurston said, their eyes were watching God. Because if we did not have a higher consciousness of our place in the world, we would have become broken-winged birds. Do you think that, so I say a movement, because do you think Harriet Tubman did all that by herself?
No.
The community had to be in lockstep with that movement. Somebody had to keep the secret. Somebody had to look out for them. Somebody had to give them food. So it was a coordinated movement. And movements don't just happen overnight. They are dynamic. They build. They reach a crescendo, fall lower, and then go back up again. So the Southern Freedom Movement descends from that movement that began in the bush harbors during enslavement. It is not a Northern progressive movement. It is not a materialization. You see, the Northern progressive movement is not a spiritual movement, it's wholly material. It says that if we give you the right to vote, if we give you access to an education, if you do this, then you'll be just like the ruling class and you'll have a good life. But what the Southern Freedom Movement said was, wait, that's the outward world, but unless we change the inner world, that if you have bread, the bread will grow mold because the society is molded. So what we have to do is we have to do what? Have, as Martin Luther King says, we have to have a transformational values. What do you think about that, Jacqui, as someone who deals with that question every day? Do you find that people are more apt to believe that freedom is a materialization of reality and not deal with the spiritual aspect, and therefore believe? You see, when people tell you that you're privileged to have materialism and to consume life,
Yeah.
why change?
Why change? Yeah.
Why change?
Yeah. And I think the conversations you and I have been having the last month or so have really provoked me to examine, honestly, to examine an articulation of my faith. That's what I want to say. That the faith wasn't missing, but to examine articulation of my faith. In other words, here we are with a poverty of values. We have so many societal ills to list: unemployment, opioid crisis, right? Violence against women, against trans people, people in jail, people incarcerated. I cannot believe what's happening with anti-Semitism raising, like ding, 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 ding. So many things to which to be outraged. And you asked me, and then a couple of congregants asked me, like, so what's the stuff that fixes that? And I would say, Ruby, I agree with you in a way that our northern progressive conversations are sometimes godless. I mean, I don't think we mean to be godless, but we're so left and so progressive and so open-minded. It could feel like God is quaint. And to be frank, as I look around the room, I know my people. A lot of my people are in the movement not because they believe in God. They're in the movement because they believe in love, or they believe in hope, and that's great. Perfect. But I'm in the movement because I believe in God. And I just was kind of challenged by the power to articulate the why for me. Like the why for me, and therefore the why for us. And therefore the why for many of us is a kind of holy other that is both transcendent and immanent, that I call God, but a power that we can't pretend doesn't exist. It exists. And if we can tap into that power, again, that I call God, I think there's more we can do than not do. And I think that power has a trajectory, an arc in time, in history, that is not to be laughed at or mocked or taken lightly. There is something at work inside the human being that when we harness it, it's more than we are individually.
Let me just say something very, very controversial, and you might want to engage in this controversy. Northern liberalism and conservatism is really a conversation between white people about how to best keep white supremacy in place. And so there's a different approach. The conservative says that no, we're not going to let black folk or brown folk participate in nothing, that we're going to keep it all to ourselves.
Right.
And because they are subhuman, and they are not capable, and they are inferior.
Right.
Northern liberals said, hold on. We are going to take a little bit of what Machiavelli said. And although we're going to destroy the culture, what we're going to do is that we're going to melt them down to look like us. And we're going to let a few elites come in the door so that the masses won't ultimately tear down the house. And so we believe that black folk have intelligence, and that if we educate them, they can become just like us. And that's the melting pot integrationist experiment. But really, it is not to tear the roof off the house, but it's to keep the house standing. And it's just a different approach to how that happens.
Yes.
And what I'm really trying to say is that this is what was different about the Southern Freedom Movement. It was a call to build a world house where there was plenty of good room for everybody. And Martin Luther King and members of the Southern Freedom Movement in my community realized that you had to wade in the water and you had to trouble the waters in order to have to create something different. So Martin Luther King, when you read him deeply and study him, he constantly railed against integration, because he was not wanting to deculturalize black people. He did not want to strip us of our culture to become like white people. He wanted us to have a choice between democracy and apartheid. So what Northern liberal, and so that there was this conversation between King and Northern liberals in the letter from Birmingham. He was just as upset with Northern liberals than he was with white conservatives, Southerners, for very different reasons. Because when it finally happened, they were saying to him, go slow, you're moving too fast. That was not Southerners saying to him. They were saying, don't you move at all. Northern liberals were saying, you're moving too fast.
Right.
And he said, justice delayed is what?
Justice denied.
Justice denied. And so what I'm saying, that we must realize that all of the things that Jacqui enumerated, unfortunately, they're not new.
Right.
They began with the doctrine of discovery that decided that indigenous people did not have a soul, that they were not worthy and valued in the eyes of God, that, as Jacqui pointed out today, that the Europeans were a chosen people who had a manifest destiny and a divine destiny condoned by God to build, as the pilgrim, as the Puritan John Winthrop said, a city upon the hill. And I hear so many people quoting that and not understanding that that's the most imperialistic, genocidal statement that one could make. Because it says to you that you're going to build a city as if no one else existed before you started building the city. Right. It also says that you think that your city is the only city, although there are cities there when you came. Right. So it's really a very problematic statement. So what am I saying? I'm saying that you can have 100 different politicians, you can vote in 1 million different people, but unless we have a change of values and a change of how we see each other, and unless we change our relationship with God and each other, we will keep reproducing the same spiritual diseases. Exactly. Because who we are on the inside cannot be separated from what we do on the outside. So our business, Jacqui and my business, we're not historians. We're not sociologists, although we do history. We're not politicians. We're faith workers. Our business is soul business, spirit work, to help people rebuild the chasm between their inner lives and their outer existences, and to move from idolatry to an acceptance that there's only but one God, universality of God. And I just want to say something, and I don't mean to offend anyone, but we've got to go back and look at Hebrew scripture. We've got to ask the question, it doesn't always say this is what you should do. It requires you to use your intelligence to say that this story tells me what we shouldn't do.
Yeah. Amen.
How could Joshua believe after having been enslaved that God told him to go and commit genocide and take land? Was from people, from other people, as a way of freedom and victory. Were we to assume that God only loved Joshua and his people, and that God did not love the people whom Joshua was killing? But yet we tell that story in church over and over and over again, and we don't recognize it as a foundation for Western imperialism. We don't recognize it as a foundation for Zionism, where people believe that God is given. I mean, you know, my family was stolen from Africa. We went through hell in this country. But if I wake up one morning and say, God told me to go back to Ghana and take over Ghana because what Americans did to me, people would put me in a mental institution. Because that would be ridiculous.
Right.
And so that we've got to really begin to be honest about our beliefs. And that's the lesson that the Southern Freedom Movement teaches us, to go deeply in our inner thinking and to build a mountaintop consciousness. Prophet Muhammad, Prophet Jesus, Prophet Buddha.
Yeah.
All were engaged in one universal project, to build a higher consciousness and to eradicate tribalism and build universalism, and to move from a tribal God to the most magnificent universal God who loves and have faith in each of us. But God's love, the other thing that I want to say about the movement, we did not believe that God's love exempted us from moral responsibility for the ways in which we lived in the world. Neither did we believe that God was all love and never anger. Because if God never gets angry, then why should you change? If there's no punishment for evil deeds. You know, white Christians want this loving God who's never angry, who loves you no matter what you do, no matter how much genocide, no matter how much state-sanctioned rape, no matter what, God is going to love you without any qualifications. I'm sorry, I don't believe that. Because if God loves you and we're stepping on people, then that means that God doesn't love the people that we're stepping on. So that's a problem, right?
It's a huge problem.
Was that too much?
No, that was good though. It wasn't too much. Look, there's a lot in there. I want to just pull some of that out to say, for example, maybe Peter Parris's book. Read Peter Parris's book, Spirituality of African People, old book. I read it in seminary, and he was trying to wrestle with, like, how do Africans become Christian? What's the foundational text, stories, faith, praxis that makes an African choose Christianity? And he did stuff about, you know, Trinity makes sense because we do ancestor worship and like all kinds of things. But I wondered, and I wonder what you think about this. Was it a gift to be African in America? Was it a gift to be African in America and to have the Spirit of God pulsating in the bush, in the woods, in the cabins, singing, without having a canon, without having read all the crap, the Empire Scripture? In other words, the holy imagination or the spiritual imagination of Africans in America, we didn't have to walk through empire, imperialized stories to believe in a God of liberation and love. And I wonder if that's some kind of gift. I just want to push that around a bit because, in fact, all of the Bible is, sorry, everybody, but the Bible is humankind created, man created. in a conversation with God, right? It's theologically wrestling. It's not inerrant. If you think so and I have hurt your feelings, I'm sorry. It is the theological project, the Bible is, right? So, but you have Africans in America creating their own canon about hope and love and resilience and peace, and we can get there together, and love is in the wilderness. I think that just captures my imagination that they didn't have to walk through the empire to get to God. I think a lot of the Bible is the result of people having to walk through empire to get to God, so the Bible gets empired right away. So the Hebrew people, nobody I know that's Jewish, really, that I know that's Jewish, thinks that genocide of a people is the right way to get the land from.
Well, but that isn't true. I think that's giving into tyranny. There are Zionists who really believe that the project in Israel is God called. Okay, let's be honest. Okay. Because that's really important.
That they believe that they should take
and just like there are black people in this country who believe that despite all of what we've gone through, that it's okay to go to the Middle East and kill other people who are going through the same things that we've gone through. So that says that these are universal impulses in all human beings. They're not exclusive to Jews. They're not exclusive to any group. But in fact, they do exist within the human impulse, and we must call it out. And so I'm saying to you, it's not just
Jewish
to pretend that because you critique a fault in a race that you're condemning that says that the whole race is bad. Mm-hmm. No race is above critique. Black people are not above critique. Muslims are not above critique, and Jews are not above critique. And to use your power to stifle critique is to be morally bankrupt. Right. And so let's be very clear about that. I'm very clear about critiquing what I think are black people's complicity with the American project. Because if I don't do that, what is the impetus for change? And I do not believe that it's a gift to be an African American. What I think God's gift is that God has said to us that my consciousness, the consciousness of God, is in all of us. That's our gift. And what God has said to African Americans, if you listen deeply enough, you will hear my voice. And I will never leave you alone. And I will be your light in a strange land. That I will be your host in an inhospitable land. But that invitation is open to all people who are willing to abide and listen to that very special and tender consciousness of God that is in each of us. I guess what I'm saying, Jacqui, is that I do not believe in any special or chosen. That what God offers to me, black people, God offers to everyone.
Yeah,
if in fact they're willing to hear it.
And I'm not saying that we're more special. I'm trying to get at black folks' religion, Ruby. And maybe I'm not taking us there. No,
I hear you, but I think it's important that we clarify that because
that's good.
Because one of the things, this is what Audre Lorde made us understand, that because we have been oppressed, right, it does not make all of our wants holy.
Make us.
It does not make everything we want holy.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And so I say this because we live in an age where certain critique is problematic. There's a difference between righteous critique and racist critique. Mm-hmm. If I critique Zionism, I'm not being anti-Semitic. I'm asking us to consider what does it mean to take over a country where other people have existed and commit genocide in the name of God. Yep. That's all I'm asking. In the same way that I ask black people, what does it mean to gain the world and to become foot soldiers? What does it mean to become foot soldiers for the empire?
Yeah, that's helpful.
Every group must ask the fundamental question of what is their relationship with God and what is our relationship with the empire.
Beautiful.
And no one is above critique. And there's a difference between hate speech and rational critique. And because I'm in my 70s, I feel like I can say that and nobody can do anything to harm me. Because I don't need their jobs.
Amen.
And
Ruby,
so that's
good.
really important.
I think that's right. I really appreciate the help in that. It'd be the same thing if you and I were in a context in let's say, Rwanda, dealing with
Yes.
Hutu and Tutsi, we can make a critique of that tribalism that is born of fear and hatred, right? That says, I have a claim over this space and your body doesn't belong here. This is a part of all humankind's wrestling, right, with empire.
Yes, but I think that this is where empire works in a very subtle way. Every time black people make a critique about certain forms, isms, we feel the need to turn around and say what our defects are, so that we coddle the people whom we've critiqued. And I'm saying there are some critiques that must stand by themselves. And I don't need to, every time I critique a group, women or trans people,
Right.
I don't need to turn around and offer critique of black people to show that I'm just like everybody else. That is problematic because that's a kind of tyranny. That's how power works.
Yeah.
And so what I'm saying is that trans people need to be able to critique heterosexual people. But at the same time, whether it's not transphobia to critique trans people. And I don't give into that trans terror either, because it's not just enough to say to become another gender. It is also important to how you go and occupy the space that you're becoming a member of.
Yep.
Do you come in as an invader or do you come in as a companion? How do you enter that space? Do you come in a way that you deny that other people existed before you ever came there? Or do you come there and rearrange all the furniture in the house and people don't know where they can sit anymore? These are important questions. No one is above critique.
Amen.
And that's what that's why Martin Luther King was ultimately killed. Because he went across the line. It wasn't because of the Vietnam War. He had critiquing wars were commonplace in his society. It was that he was calling for a revolution of values, that he had been seduced into materializing the movement with the Poor People's Campaign. He had strayed away. People had told him that let's focus on the vote. Let's focus on this, let's focus on that. They had pulled him away from the spiritual message. That if you change the values and if you move from a thing society to a people-oriented society, then you would not have voter suppression. You would not have lynching. You would not have the atrocities. You would not have the white pain that white people suffer, because there's something painful about someone murdering all of your identities,
Yeah.
and reducing you to a mere skin. To tell you, this thing is deep because nationalism in Europe became an excuse to eradicate class differences, to make all Europeans think that they were the same as aristocracy, and made ordinary people who were languishing in poverty, dying from the Black Death, languishing from diseases, to feel that they had the same thing in interest, same interests as the king, and they were willing to go and die for the king. That erasure is long and deep.
Yeah.
It's a deepness. And so in the 21st century, we must echo Martin Luther King's words. We must ask, America, where does it hurt? America, because obviously we're hurting.
Right.
Where does it hurt? And the greatest assault against white America by the guardians of whiteness is to say that your life is perfect, you have no hurts. Everything is all right because you have white skin and because we give you economic privileges. Never mind what's going on in your souls. Never mind that every day if you're a woman, we ask you to vote for white and not your gender. Never mind the suicides that you have to commit for the price of the ticket. If you're a white man, white men can never break rank. To break rank is to be subversive, because in order for white supremacy to exist, white men must be in lockstep. And so white men are conditioned to a sort of spiritual and social numbness. Where does it hurt white men? So this is what Martin Luther King was about. He was about the business of our spiritual hurts and offering a balm in Gilead. And to say that everybody has been hurt by the culture of whiteness, and that we have to begin to touch each other's hurts and shatter the lie that the expression of a good life is what we possess and what we own, rather than what we think and what we feel, and how we move in the world. That's the message for the 21st century. It's really quite depressing when people keep saying that they're privileged. Yes, to have material goods means that you might have something that I don't have, or to have rights that I don't have. But is it privilege to be killed, to be murdered, to have your identities wiped away and become this reconstructed something called a white monolith? That there's no history, there's no culture,
No ethnicity.
there's nothing except skin.
Yeah.
Is that a privilege? Once you touch that hurt, and once I touch my hurt, we're going to be a force for the society to reckon with. But as long as we repress our hurts, they are free for us to turn our hurts against each other.
Yeah.
And for all of us, black, white elites, all of us, white people who came over as immigrants, running away from poverty, running away from all of the oppression in Europe, adopted this motto that they'll never go home again, that they'll never be poor again, that they'll never experience being outsiders again. So they became insiders, even if it meant lying to themselves. Black folk who grew up on plantations in the South decided that they would never go home again. And so in the vernacular of my community, they became educated fools.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where they began to develop a class system where we began to fragment ourselves. I guess what I'm really trying to say, and Jacqui didn't get a word in, but that's okay. She's with y'all every Sunday.
I get to preach next week. It's okay.
But I
It's so
really
good to hear you, Ruby.
feel this on my heart because we're in very troubled times.
Yes. Yeah.
And we must begin to really speak truth. And I want to ask each of you tonight, do you believe that what you possess and what you own is the expression of a good life? If you do, then I'll tell you what God you believe in. But if you believe that how you feel in your inner life, in your consciousness, that the consciousness of God in each of us, that mystical area that no one can touch, is important to a good life, that transactional results as well as transcendent impulses make up a good life, then I'll tell you what God you worship.
Ruby, let me ask you another question about the source of this, the source of the community's resilience, ethos, work, the source of King's theology, the source of yours. Could you talk about black folks' religion and the movement? Could you say something about the text, the texture, the music, teach us.
Black folk were faced with the fundamental question of how do we reaffirm our humanities in a society that imprisoned us on plantations, sites of terror called plantations, and that tried to reduce us to property and eradicate all of our humanities, even detach us from our relationship with God. So they came up with the brilliant idea that they would use Christianity and they would, as a liberating force in their lives. And instead of having an empire God, they would have what? A liberating God. And so that they understood, so and you could not read or write as an enslaved person, because that was a capital punishment, subject to death. So what black people had to do, we had to develop an oral tradition, right? So our God, that's why we call it was black folk theology was first and foremost oral. And it was projected through songs and spirituals and through prayers. And if you listen carefully to black prayers of that generation, or those generations of enslaved people, when they would say, I want to thank you, God, for waking me up this morning and putting breath in my body. That sounds pretty neutral, right? But if you're enslaved and someone is telling you that they're the ones who own and control you, for you to say that someone else puts breath in your body, what is that? That's a radical statement. That says that I don't believe that you're God, that you're not the one who's responsible for my getting down and my sitting down and my getting up, right? Black prayers were, and then we went on to say that I want to thank you for the use of my limbs. I want to, and for the right to see. And Master God, sir, notice the language, Master God, sir, I want to thank you for the multiplication of my tongue. I want to thank you for the words that I speak. I want to thank you for the complexity of my ideas. That was black folk theology. And then once they haven't thank God, they would all sing, I love everybody, or I've got a right, you've got a right, I've got a right to the tree of life. Don't you know what the tree of life was? Creation and democracy. A radical statement. So black people were speaking in parables with the spirituals. So black folk theology is a life-giving theology compared to empire theology, which is death-driven theology that separates us from the love of God, separates us from each other, separates us from our family, separates us from the multidimensional aspects of our identities. Whereas black folk theology was ordinary black folk coming together, engaging in a conversation not only about God, but about their humanities, and believe it or not, even the humanity of the very people who were enslaving them. That's black folk theology. It's redemptive, it's reconciling, it's restorative, it's resurrection.
Yeah.
It's all of what we've come to understand as being life-affirming aspects of the human project.
It's revolutionary.
It's revolutionary love.
Yeah.
It's revolutionary relationships. And what I would say, and this is what I would say to everybody in this room. In the beginning was the consciousness of God. Not the Word of God. I know the Bible says in the beginning was the Word. I'm going to say that in the beginning was the consciousness of God. And the consciousness of God became manifested in creation. And everything in creation was of and by God and with God, right?
Yes.
So that you have the power to become whole, to be evolved, to touch your capacities. The only chains that hold us back are the chains that we've learned in empire. And it's not about what I can do. It's not about looking outward, because other people can take care of their lives if you'll just take care of yours. If you will look inside of yourselves, it's not about going and rescuing black folk, because we've survived 400 years, thank you. It's not about going out rescuing indigenous people. They've survived 500 plus years, thank you. It's not about rescuing white radicals. They've done well all the way back from the abolitionist movement, thank you. It's about getting rid of the rot gut that we have breathed, the pollution in our own souls that we have breathed, that we keep breathing outward into the atmosphere. If we do that, I guarantee you, we will have a revolution.
Amen.
It's not about being missionaries. It's not about being so privileged that we can go out and help underprivileged people. Because when Jesus talked about the poor would be with us always, he was not talking about economic poverty. Jesus was a spirit man. He was talking about spiritual poverty. And so that's what I'm saying. So let's do something different in the 21st century. Let's stop saying what can we do for people to make their lives better. What can we do in our own lives that stand in the way of people having better lives? How do each of us bear the marks of empire? That's the question. Each of us have been contaminated by the pollution of empire. None of our hands are clean. None of our breaths are free of the stench. And every day you have to work. Every day I ask myself, this is really true, and Cheryl can tell you. Every day I say, God, don't let me be seduced by the opiates of empire. Don't let me start to need all this adulation and all of these awards. Help me to stand before the world without form or fashion. Because the minute you start needing that stuff, you're no longer free. Because then your mission becomes the stuff and not the work. Mm-hmm. And what the empire is very good at is co-opting and giving you the stuff and making you believe that you're the exceptional Negro without understanding that if people didn't show up at demonstrations, there'd be no demonstration. That you're nobody except part of a group. And that's what we have to do. And so, although I appreciate when people respect the work I do, I must make a confession. I don't like to be called an icon, because only God is an icon. And once you start iconizing human beings, you have fallen into the trap of white supremacy. And let me tell you, if anybody in the movement, what we knew is that if anybody wanted their light to shine by making you dim your light, then my advice to you is to run as fast as you can away from that person. Because they are into hierarchy. And they are wanting you to worship them as they've learned to worship empire. So that our job is to get rid of all of that lust and longing in our hearts to be just like them. And to learn to be ordinary people who can stand before the world naked, without form or fashion, believing with the faithfulness of our faith that we are somebody because God has already credentialed us. Mm. And that's what's necessary. Jacqui, let me ask you to sum up all of what I said.
Oh my goodness.
Okay, Rev, sum it up.
Ruby, in 30 seconds, I'll tell you what my heart's resonating.
Okay.
Which is almost the same. Yeah, I mean, the things that you're teaching me, Ruby, all the time, but today, putting a nail in, I'm going to go humility. We're part of a movement. We're part of a river. We're part of an organism. that's in motion. You don't like the word icon. I get that. I shall not say it ever again. But there's a way in which really you don't think of yourself as outside of something that's happening, that's already happening. It was happening. It was happening. Harriet Tubman, it was happening. It is happening. It flowed through the students that you, Diane Nash and Stokely. It flowed through John Lewis. It flowed through King. It flowed through all the people whose names we don't know, who sat at lunchroom counters, who marched, who resisted, who saw themselves as relating to a liberating God, not an empire God. That's a takeaway I have, which I think is so important for today. I think the other thing is something about theology, something about the way we talk about God, that we know that a lot of that stuff is projection, but when we strip down to get to where God is, and God is a revolutionary love power, from that place, critiquing our systems and our structures and ourselves is a valid critique. We don't have to, as black people, be apologetic about our critique. Queer people don't have to be apologetic about their critique. We get to critique powers and structures and systems and without like having to smash in and be generic, right? Because the critique is what will make us free. That's another takeaway. I think the third thing I'd say that's really resonating is just Ruby, you at 70 something, 1 or 70 something. Okay, Cheryl, I won't look at you. But I'm talking about you've lived a life. And there's something about the wisdom of the people who've lived a life that we are blessed to partake in. I mean, Linda's nodding and Carrie's nodding like, we cannot act like we who are or 40 or something know all the things, because we don't. We really have to have a relationship with the people who have lived longer than we have and set tables with them and love on them the way they love on us. That this is an intergenerational moment that needs to be rich and juicy and full of the things that can happen from your front porch, Ruby, is good conversation that trains and teaches us. Those are my thoughts. How did you, Linda? Did I miss anything in there?
Let me ask everybody a question. Yeah. How many of you in here can tell me the names of your great-great-grandparents on your mother's side and on your father's side? Just raise your hands.
Great. That's one great.
Very small number, don't you think?
Yeah.
What does that tell you about what we've been talking about today?
Mm-hmm. We got work to do. Separation, yeah.
Yes, and dismemory, right?
Dismemory, yeah.
And what is it that you're not remembering? You're not remembering when your grandparents stood outside when they were strangers at the gate of power. And that's the whole purpose of the dismemory. Because once we all remember when our ancestors stood outside the gates of power, that's the common ground that we can walk home together with.
Yeah.
But as long as we forget that, then we can other each other and pretend and to riddle and shame because all of our families were not rich or we were not, our ancestors were not middle class. So we make up these stories about we forget that we came from poverty. We forget that we came, because we're ashamed of it. Because to be who we are means that we must have, that if we are not who they say we should be, then something is wrong with us. And I think that each of us carry a great deal of shame. I know that there are some black people who hide their roots, and many, many white people pretend that they woke up every morning and was born middle class. Mm-hmm. They never talk about their working class roots. They never talk about their victorious grandparents who made a way out of no way. That's history to be proud of. Instead, they claim the history of the oppressor. Amen. By pretending that they always had stuff. So I think that it is important for us in this season to go back and claim our ethnic roots and to claim the sound of our great-grandparents' voice and struggles. Amen. And if you do that, I promise you, your hearts will be tender. and we will no longer be others in each other's sights. And let's get rid of the shame of whiteness. Do you believe that whiteness carries with it a certain shame? Let me see your hands if you agree. Don't you think Jacqui's work as your pastor is to engage you in a process where you get rid of the shame? Are you going to help her do that? Because she can't do that by herself.
Raise your hand if you're going to help me do that.
Raise your hand.
All right. All right. I don't see your hand. I'm coming to get you. Yeah.
No, really, I'm serious. I find I'm working with a group of white men. They came 25 strong from around the country. And it was very interesting. Cheryl was a part of that conversation. We came to deal with the wounds of whiteness in their lives. And for the first day, all they could pontificate, they could give you an analysis of capitalism and colonial capitalism and but they could not say what they felt. They could tell you what was in their head, but couldn't touch the heart because there was such a numbness there. And when I really scratched the surface of that, they were that small. All of the posturing about being large was really covered by a deep sense of smallness.
Wow.
And I had a revelation, and we all had a revelation that day. And we began to touch the shame. And the shame is dealt with in one or two ways. Progressive people say to white men, shut up. You can't talk because you're this, you're that. Anybody who tells you you can't talk, you run away from them too, because they're trying to kill you. That's not the answer to the solution. But the question is, how do you show up differently? And how is it that you live in a world that you begin to feel not only the harm that you've done to others, but the harm that the world has done to you? And it was very interesting, the second day of that gathering, those men began to talk about what they felt. They began to touch their numbness. And a strange thing happened that first day. When we went around introducing ourselves, I noticed something that shocked me. They said, well, my name is such and such a person. My grandparents owned slaves. Or my name is such and such a person, and my uncle was a member of the Ku Klux Klan. Something struck me as really ironical and paradoxical, that on the one hand, while they pretended to be ashamed, there's a part of them that liked that because it meant that they were part of a ruling class.
Wow.
So that they said that as a pretense of contrition, but really it was a way of saying that I'm not poor white trash, that I came from the aristocracy. And I called it out. Those are the ambivalences that we must deal with. We must deal with those, and it shows up in all of our speech. It shows up in my speech. It shows up in your speech. Who is it that we want to be claimed by? Who are our significant others?
Okay.
Can we sing one song before we
can. We're not done. We're going to sing a song. We can sing a song, but then I would love to put them in a Q&A. Do you want to sing?
Can we sing Wade in the Water?
We can.
Could you lead
Dion, can you help us? I got my beautiful musician there, and we can find a key, and we can sing Wade in the Water. God's going to trouble the waters.
Wade. All right, Middle, let's sing. Sing, Middle. Wade in the water.
Wade in the water, children. Wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. Wade in the water.
Wade in the water.
Wade in the water.
Wade in the water, children. Wade in the water.
God's gonna trouble the water. God's gonna trouble. God's gonna trouble the water. God's gonna trouble.
God's gonna trouble the
One more time, God. God's gonna trouble the water.
God's going to trouble the water.
Thank you, Dion. Let's have some conversation. Let's take a few questions. Now, I'm not trying to be mean, but the lecturer is here. Okay, I do. The lecturer is here, and so you ask a question. Does that feel good? Invite a question, make a comment. And say your name, stand up so we can see you, babe.
Hi, I'm Jawanta. Thank you both so much.
Hey,
Having a
Jawanta.
good time.
Hi.
Jacqui, you once preached a sermon about metanoia, and it's coming up a lot here for me. And also, Dr. Cornell West talks a lot about paideia, and I was wondering if you two would explore what those words mean for the congregation here and sort of like how that happens. Just because metanoia, I think, is sort of what leads to that transformation, and I think it really transformed how I think about my political work. So, thank you.
Thank you. Say the second word, honey, that Cornell said. Just say it again.
Paideia.
Paideia. Okay.
Which is learning how to die.
Right. Learning how to. Well, there we go. Metanoia and paideia. Learning how to be changed, learning how to die. Ruby, you want to talk about that?
No, you do it.
Let me do it? Okay. Thank you, Ruby.
I'm
Well,
exhausted.
I'm being playful, only like just a teeny bit, but I actually think they're the same thing in a way. Like that the metanoia word is at that Greek place, be not conformed to the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds. I think when that was written, there's a sense of butterfly, or turning into a thing, so you become a thing. I think about conform is taking some Play-Doh and pushing it through, extruding it. That's taking the shape of. But transform is really changed. And actually, I think there's a little dying in the changing. And it might be why we don't want to change. Because we are afraid of the void, afraid of the death.
Yes.
We're afraid of going all the way over there, right? My God, when Ruby talks about white people letting go of their roots, their ethnicity. I read an article one time, called "White Means Never Having to Say You're Ethnic." There's like the passing. I'm going to become white in America so I can survive. I'm going to leave Polish. I'm going to leave Ukrainian, right? I'm going to leave Jewish. My Jewish friends are calling themselves white now. I'm like, what? When did that happen? But there's something that died when they let go of their ethnicity, to be transformed into white. But if we're going to transform, let's say, into something that we have we think of more as an ideal. Excuse me. Too much talking. Let's say our picture of what that is the whole people of God. Let's say that we buy into maybe Ubuntu, right? I am because you are. So it's not just me becoming me, it's me becoming we. If we are going to be the whole people of God, I've got to die a little bit to my individuality. I've got to die a bit to my pride. I've got to die a bit to my shame. I've got to die a bit to my roadmap, the one you inherit from your Mississippi raised black parents that say this is what success looks like. So I'm thinking I would make a connection between, just like in the insect world or in parts of the animal world, there's a shedding, a letting go of, a little bit of dying to become. I think we have to die a little to become. And I think some of those courageous people who are willing to die so we could become blows my mind wide open. But it happened. We get to become in the wake of their dying. And if each of us are willing to let a little bit of the thing that blocks us die, I think we will become the humanity that God intended. That's my thought. Yeah. Was that
How
all right?
many of you feel large in a capitalist technocracy? How many of you really believe that do you feel valued?
How many of you feel valued?
How many of you feel valued in a capitalist technocracy?
Oh, everybody went, oh,
How many of you
not there.
How many of you deal with the question of loneliness and alienation? Let's be honest. How many of you wake up some mornings depressed? We got a community going on. You know why? Because no matter the age, no matter the sexuality, no matter the ethnicity, what? We all have what? These common feelings, right?
Yeah.
So the question is, where do they come from? And how might we begin to be healed? And whether or not consuming has changed any of that.
Yeah.
And whether or not power has changed any of that. Mm-hmm. Because let's face it, the guardians of whiteness are insatiable. There's not enough power, there's not enough money, there's not enough land theft, there's not enough genocide to satisfy that hunger. Because the hunger is what? It's not a material hunger.
It's
a
spiritual
spiritual hunger. And so how is it then do we begin to develop a movement that is both transcendent as well as transactional? How do we deal with these issues? And the other thing that I learned from the Southern Freedom Movement is that you don't go into communities trying to psychologically change people to make them resemble you. You don't get into, well, this person did this and they did that and they're not. We showed up. I didn't wear hats because I thought it was all just a bunch of crap. But when I went into the community and went to church, I put on a hat. Because the last thing that I wanted to do was to go into a community that was totally disrespected every day, to say that I'm working with you, but I also disrespect you because I'm going to tell you once again you're doing everything wrong. Mm-hmm. Why would anybody want to work with you? What is the good news? So you negotiate a way that you negotiate the I with the we. It's not going to kill you to put on a hat. The mission is not whether or not you wear hats. The mission is building what? A beloved community.
Right.
But in whiteness, it's either my way or the highway. So you go into communities where people do things very differently, and automatically you start trying to rearrange their house without understanding, wow, this is a new seat. Let me figure out how to sit here. And that's the work that we've got to do. We've got to stop insisting. You know, when Cheryl and I went to live with my mother in Columbus, Georgia, who was very fun and very loving of Cheryl, my partner. And she was so fond of Cheryl that when she was dying, although two of her sons are lawyers, two of my brothers are lawyers, one's a civil rights lawyer and the other one is a corporate lawyer, she made Cheryl be in charge of all her financial matters. Okay, that was one aspect, but the other aspect was she would say to me and Cheryl, when you're in Rome, you got to do as Romans do. And she made us stop dressing a certain kind of way. I did that. Although it annoyed the hell out of me, I did it. Because it didn't mean that she didn't love Cheryl. It didn't mean that she didn't love me. It meant that my mother was of a certain generation. And what was more important to me was not that she made me put on a different pair of pants instead of blue jeans. What was important enough is that she loved my partner like she was her own daughter. That was what was significant. So I was not going to fight with her over a pair of blue jeans. And that's what I mean. And so this is where we have to begin to understand what is important. My mother was a Southern Baptist deaconess, head of the deacon board, who went to her Baptist church and told everybody that Cheryl was her daughter. My church that I grew up in at First African Baptist, I got jealous because despite the hit that black church is so homophobic, they loved Cheryl more than they loved me, and I got jealous.
Cheryl, let's talk about that sometime.
Really, I'm serious.
That's great.
You can't make these absolute judgments about people. You have to take the love that they can offer and help them to get to another level while they're helping you, because you don't come there perfect either. You got some rough edges.
How many of you came in here perfect? Just to do Ruby's exercise. Gloria, okay. Yeah.
So these are important. So how do we negotiate the common space, right? How do we accept love? Does love have to be everything that we want it to be? Are we willing to negotiate the meaning of love? I know Cheryl and I did with my mother.
Bless her. Thank you, Ruby. Let's take a question from...
My name is Paul. Thank you both very much for this. It's very powerful. I'm an unabashed white northern liberal progressive. And so earlier you were talking about the difference between northern liberalism and southern Christianity.
Right.
And
no, not southern Christianity, Southern Freedom Movement.
Southern Freedom Movement. And you made mention of the fact that some of us white people like to educate blacks so they can be like us, whereas I was raised to think that educating blacks made a better community, made all of us whole, made all the boats rise with the tide. So I want to have a little bit more of a dialogue around that, and I think it's rooted in a little bit more of the individualism of Christianity. You talk about black religious being, talk about I, you use a lot more personal pronouns, whereas my Christianity is based more on the plural pronouns, our community, us, we work together. And Jacqui started to tackle that a little bit now with breaking down of the self to make the community stronger. So can you talk a little bit about either how community builds towards the negative of empire, right? If you think about us coming together, empire might be a way of forcing community on others in a way that's negative, or community is a more positive aspect in how we can break down ourselves and our individualism to become a more community-based Christianity.
Even when we think we speak freedom language, we speak in forked tongues. We speak the language of empire. Let's be very clear about that. Now, it's really important to understand, as Plato and Aristotle reminded us, that there's no such thing as education that's value-free. That education protects of what? The prerogatives of whom? According to Plato, who does education protect? The guardians of society.
Right.
They protect the status quo. That's why when you go to school, you learn white American history and you don't learn black history. You don't learn Latinx history. You learn what? You learn, as Howard Zinn pointed out, you don't learn the people's history. So education is an instrument, as Machiavelli pointed out, to eradicate the culture consciousness of a people and to embed in them the consciousness of empire. So to think that education is value-free is to be somewhere in la-la land. To think that, why do you think women have to fight for women's studies? Because all the people were men. So that's the first thing. So we have to begin to offer a critique of an emancipatory praxis that builds on we've got a very complicated task. How is it that we speak in tongues within the educational system where everybody exists in the conversation? So to take black kids out of their communities at 5 and 6 years old and have them never to go home again, that helps the empire, but it depletes the talents of the black community. Mm-hmm. That's called co-optation and the pilfering and so I want to say something about, Cheryl and I attended a Black Lives Matter meeting in Atlanta, and I want you to hear this, and then let's talk a moment about it. It was the first time that the whole community practically in Atlanta came out. All of these black women came out from public housing. All of these black women came out from working class communities around the city. Black men, there were so many black men that had to stand out in the yard. The church was so full. Black Lives Matter had the community in its hands, in its purview for the first time. The community was on the move. What ensued in the meeting was that there was a big argument one woman from the community stood up and called herself a she. And people went berserk about the use of that pronoun. And she said, but I've been a woman all of my life. What am I supposed to call myself? Because I got, my mama, you know, guess what happened? Cheryl, tell them what happened before the thing was over. What happened?
Wait, give Cheryl a mic.
They got lost in the, okay, you stand up and introduce yourself and say, my pronouns are she, her, blah, blah, blah. And the older black community is saying, can I just talk? Let's join here in communities instead of the intergenerational youth saying, but you got to make sure in your introduction you talk about she, her, or which pronouns, or they, them, or, you know, and
They had never had,
they
this was
left.
the first time they'd ever heard this. They had to go home and think about it. But people got very upset because they didn't respond on the moment the way that they thought, and so the whole community left. And at the end of and in the middle of the meeting, there were 5 people left, the organizers, me and Cheryl, and we ultimately walked out too. What is the moral of that story?
I think the moral of the story is we've got to make some space for people to be on a journey and not
Right.
be Pharisaic about our expectations. They jump into our frame.
And one woman said to one of the white organizers, look, we have made excuses, we've made room for white people, we've forgiven you over and over and over again. And you mean to tell me you're too intolerant in this moment because I don't understand what you're saying, that you're going to say I'm a bad person? Then what am I to make of you? And on that note, the whole community left. Yeah.
Yeah, let's hear a couple of things and we'll see what we can put together.
Can I-
Thanks, Ananda, for that.
Should I?
Hi, I'm really happy to be here. My name is Yael Kanarek. I'm a neighbor.
Hi.
I'm Jewish. I'm very involved in rethinking the theology for the next century by regendering the Bible. I'm rewriting it, reversing the genders of all the characters. Because, well, first of all, I'm also fluent in Hebrew. The reason I'm doing this is because I don't think that we can stop talking about the empire unless we women and men know how to pray to her. It's absolutely
About what?
necessary.
Say that again.
Know how to pray to her, to God.
Okay.
As she, yeah.
Okay? As long as it's one, it's the empire. When we start learning how to pray to her, we start to feel and build in ourselves. Fine? I'm going to express, and then you can completely denounce it.
No, I'm having a ringing in my ear.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. When we start praying to her, and she gives birth to the Eve, and the Eve is created female and male, and we start to build in ourselves these kinds of feeling and sensibilities, we can start have a theology that is authentically, internally, and I'm talking about the internal process we're getting here, internally female and male, male and female, and however you want to identify between. I'm already working in numbers. I'm going to have an exhibition in HUC. What's the question? The question is this. How can you, when you pray to the man, and in the male language all the time, how can you see outside the empire? How can you internally experience outside the empire where this is the foundational text of the empire?
Yeah.
I think that's a very interesting question, and first of all, I don't want to pray to a her, and I don't want to pray to a he. I want to pray to a spirit God who has no gender. That's the first thing. I don't want to appropriate God in my own body. The other thing that I would say about is that if people are going to be that sticky about him and her, then they ought to deal with purity laws, because purity laws become backdoors of segregation. And so that if we're going to really deal with liberating the Bible from the tongues of empire, then it is as important to not only deal with gender questions, but also to deal with what are the implications of purity laws and how have they been a backdoor for segregation, and to be as passionate about those laws and the chosen people laws as you are about gender. Because I think all of it is just rot gut, because God is none of that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any way to have this conversation past this?
Yes, absolutely. And we're going to say
Yes,
more
you-
about that.
yes.
But, so let me just don't go away. But we're going to make a way to keep talking. Podcast, conversation, etc. Can we take this question and then come back? Okay. Just two back and forth.
Yeah. So I don't know if it's really a question, but I know you had spoken, you had asked a few times, Pastor Jacqui, about African American and their religion.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking a larger, Africans in religion and
Yeah.
in the diaspora, how Africans were scattered throughout the world, and no matter what religion or beliefs were forced on them, there was something that was inside that came out and came through whatever they were being taught or however they were being forced. And it seems that that's, how spirituality, I don't know about religion, it seems like religion is a map that someone else has created. Spirituality is what you have and you create your own map,
Yes.
Right.
And so as we have lived in the world and lived through the world, we have renamed the deities. We have done all types of things to shape and reshape those beliefs to what we had inside of us, what we felt inside of us, which I feel like everyone has. The Buddha sat under a tree. I mean, it comes from the universe, from the Most High. So it's not really a question, but in terms of addressing Africans and African religion and how Africans communicate and navigate through religion, I believe that there's something that has always been carried, that everyone has, but has come out and surfaced through, through whatever beliefs that were forced on us.
I really appreciate that, love. And I think yes.
You go ahead with that one. That's really hard.
No, I think it's a really great comment, and I think because you and I are African diaspora people, we have like a resonance with that, right? I'll bet if I was in a room and I could peek in on like a bunch of Irish women, because I have an Irish friend named Kate who like resonates with Mary. I feel like I was sitting in a room with a bunch of Irish women. I could be a fly on the wall. They could describe something similar that has to do with their Irishness and fieriness and their potato farming. There's something like in their culture where Buddha sat under a tree and they sat someplace around a fire, right? And we had drums. And I think that's the thing that is beautiful. Like if we had 10 more hours to say, how is my Africanness shaping my spirituality? Because I think you're right that it does. Then I would want to be like red-haired Devon. Like how does your Scotchness shape yours? And that wouldn't be diluting that would make a rich conversation, I think. And then I would really be curious, love, about is there a taproot when we were Eve in Africa? Like before the Scotch left Africa and became Scotch? What's that thing? Does that make sense? Wouldn't that be a great thing to talk about?
Denominator.
Exactly, yeah. So let's make sure we do that.
Well, one thing
here,
we need to say is that Africa is not a monolith.
it's not.
And so to talk about an African cosmology
It's wrong.
is to reduce Africa to a monolith.
Yes, ma'am.
That's
That's right. That's exactly right. Okay, let's gather up a few more things. There was I see here, Claudia, Nat. Okay? Okay, and we're going to go quickly because we want to get you. All of them, and we're going to respond. So 1, 2, 3, 4, I don't know, maybe 5. Okay, let's go. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you for hosting me. This is my first time here, and thank you to the elders on stage and for Joanne for inviting me. The tree of life that you mentioned, Auntie Ruby, I think is something that now more than ever I'm aware of where I fit on that tree. Before I felt I was more of a branch, realizing that my elders were the roots. And now that I'm an uncle, and also my grandma, she's turning 89 in March, who's suffering from triple negative breast cancer, I've come to see how close death can be. And not in a way that is something that causes fear or preoccupation, but one that would celebrate the life that's been lived. But I found it hard to explain something like that to my nieces. They're 4, 2, and 7 months. And I work in Colombia as a human rights lawyer, and death is everywhere. It's something that accompanies me, and I've myself haven't feared it. But I've struggled with how I might explain that reality to them, to the younger ones. And in fact, that my grandmother, who she's the closest person that I have in this life, also fears it in a way that to me makes no sense. She's had a beautiful life, that talking about privilege, who started from nothing, and now she has a granddaughter that's a doctor and a grandson that's a lawyer. It's something that I've struggled with, and I wonder, something that I think spirituality has helped me with is uncovering that. I didn't think I would find it here. I used to walk by this building when I was in law school nearby. I figured it would be a lot more pale, male, and stale than it actually is.
Did you say pale, male, and stale?
That's right,
I
sister.
love that. I'm still in that. Okay.
So I appreciate the chance to be here and for welcoming me here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Let's just keep gathering. Right there to Claudia. Thank you. Guys, we're going to be done in about 5 minutes too, so hang on. Yeah.
Hey, I'm Claudia. I'm a member of the congregation here. Ruby, what advice can you offer us on how to implement what you're saying at the ballot box?
Beautiful. Thank you, Claudia. That's her deal. Natalie?
I have two questions from online members. One is saying MLK said that Sunday is the most segregated time in America, but are not black churches still important in America? Isn't a place where blacks can come and unite away from a racist America important? And they also want to know, Ruby, your thoughts on the queer black ministry here at Middle.
Okay. And we're gathering. Carlos y Sierra. Carlos y Sierra y Mike. Go.
How do we expand this movement beyond America? Because fascinating as this conversation has been, is very America-centric.
Yes.
Very Judaism, Islam, Christianity. What do we say to people who believe in African traditions, like Changoya, Maya, traditions that are common in Afro-Latino? What do we say to Chinese people that don't believe in any of these things? How do we expand this idea beyond the confines of the culture of America?
Beautiful, Carlos. We're going to take two more thoughts. Ruby, and then you're going to pick one to answer, or two.
My name is Sierra, and I'm sitting down because it's hard for me to stand. Like Ruby, I've been around a long time. I'm hitting 82. And I can't believe, and I know this is going to aggravate some people, the amount of progress that has happened in my lifetime. The questions are out there. They were always hidden behind doors. What I hear today, and I think it's something I know I'm going to take away, there was grace in the room today, from my point of view. There was room for all of us, grace and forgiveness, and the challenge to change, which is what I love about this church. Every Sunday, we're given a new challenge to change. No matter who we are, we take it the way we take it. So I don't have so much of a question, but as a comment and a thank you. Because there are days when I may wake up angry as hell, and I've been here at times when you've been pretty angry too, Ruby, and that's great, because that's part of the change. So I'm asking and saying grace to allow for marination, for an idea that comes in and knocks you out of that building where you were, that you even had to leave that church. The time to go home and reflect and to let it happen, because if we're open to the possibility, I mean, that's the thing. I think that the last 100 years has been about getting to possibilities, and there's so many of them. Everything is changing, you know, and you can't do it all. You can only do what you can do. So grace, I'm asking for grace.
Love that.
And forgiveness of self.
This mic goes there. This was like the last two things for now. Just for now. We're gonna have more talk. Ruby lives here. She just does. She's our people.
Real quick, if you are here and you're going on the walking tour with the Middle Project, they're waiting in the lobby, so if you can go ahead and go, and they're gonna head there.
Hi, my name is Sophia. My question is, you mentioned former plantation homes, and I think you called them places of terrorism.
Sites of terror.
Sites of terrorism. I was wondering, because from my impression, a lot of that isn't being addressed. What is your take on that? What does it take for these spaces that carry a certain energy and spirit to create some healing in terms of these spaces?
And last, thank you for that.
My name is James. I just have an example that goes along with what you're saying today. I was just recently invited to speak at the UN.
James, put the mic near your mouth.
The first commission on homelessness ever by the UN. So everybody's saying, oh, well, this is a great opportunity for me. No, it's a great opportunity for them because I am homeless and I know what homelessness is. So I'm not going to speak in your frame of reference to the empire because what is a bigger part of the empire than the UN? So I'm not going to speak in abstractions about homelessness. I'm going to talk about the people and the solutions that I want them to fund me to implement. So I'm right with you.
Thank you, James. Ruby, what of those things do you want to respond to?
Sometimes I feel like a motherless child, a long way from home. To be black, to be brown in this country has always meant to be homeless, unless we created our own homes. To take us from Africa and to bring us to a strange land, to put us on sites of terror, and to separate us from our families. Then to have to migrate away from the homes that we finally created in the South because of the terrorism and the economic exploitation. Homelessness is a condition of exploitation, colonialism, enslavement, and cultural genocide. So I just think that we've got to think about things not as modern contemporary issues, but to look at the theological, spiritual, and social roots of the issue, and to be able to, I heard someone say that, what's the lawyer's name? I heard them say that John Roberts is an institutionalist, and I almost fell off of my seat. How can someone who has fought to stifle voting rights, who've used his voice to go against the Constitution, how can you call him an institutionalist? He's a white nationalist. And so I'm saying that it's really important that we began to think a little bit clearer and rescue our minds from having other people tell us what to think and to believe. And I think that sites of terror, whether it was the plantations, whether it was northern communities where black people have always lived in prisons, communities that were contained and under surveillance. So the prison industrial complex did not just happen overnight. What do you think enslavement was about? What do you think reservations are about? So we've got to broaden how we think about and understand the world, and understand that there's nothing new under the sun. What's new is maybe the way in which it's carried out, the way in which it comes, but the form is always there.
Yeah.
And I think that's the problem with Americans. We have a disassociative personalities where we split from reality, where we can murder people. For example, look at Iran. People are existing about Soleimani, what a bad person he was. But nobody's dealing with the fact that in 1953, the American CIA created a coup where they murdered. That's right. Well, absolutely. And guess who carried out that operation? Kermit Roosevelt, who's the great-grandson of Theodore Roosevelt, who talked about walking softly and carrying a big stick. Continuity. And so we then call on the death of this man who's at home, by the way, in his own home, and we're over there invading his home. and yet he's the bad guy. So I think that we've got to stop being blind. I don't want to use that word. We've got to get the cataracts out of our eyes.
That's better. That's good.
And out of our minds. We have so much materialism, but I want to say something. We're very undereducated. Let's just be honest. We're very undereducated. We consume knowledge. We don't think. How many times, how can we say that we are not like this? If I hear that phrase again, I'm going to just cut my throat.
Please don't.
Of course America's like this. It's like this, but there's also another simultaneous thread in American history. History is not dualistic, it's simultaneous. Even as we've had empirism, we've also had resistance happening at the same time. It's not either good or bad, it's both and. And so I think that that's really the question of sites of terror. For black and brown people in this country, we've always lived in sites of containment and terror. And white folks got really scared after the Southern Freedom Movement when we destabilized one of the most powerful empires, Southern empires, without firing a shot.
I want to gather up a couple things that people said as a way to bridge to the announcement that Amanda wants to make. And so over there was a question about black queer ministry here at Middle. What does Ruby think about it? Tell whoever typed, Ruby's black and queer, but I think she would say we want to be able to be more than one identity in a room. We want to be all the identities we're in a room. So I'm going to answer that way.
And I don't see, the question was not for, I can't say this strong enough. The movement was not for integration. It was for democratization.
Right.
It was the right to have a choice and not to be commanded to live in either this or that zone, but to have the right to be free and to be mobile. That if I want to go to a white church, I go to a white church. If I want to go to an integrated church, I go to an integrated church. If I want to go to a black church, I do that. But it's not because I'm compelled to do it, because of the color line.
Right. Yep.
But that everybody has the choice to be where they want to be, not because they're trying to keep someone else out.
Yes.
But because of other frames of references. So we're looking for democratization and not integration or segregation.
And we're looking for widening concentric circles of liberation. I'm just going to say that as a phrase I'm making up right now. But I think that whole idea of I can go where I want to go, be who I want to be, is a womanist concept. It's liberation theology. All of these conversations have flaws and fault lines. But I think that for me, the ideal is ever widening circles, Carlos, to your question of intersectionality and space making, liberation. And we did have an American conversation today. And the trajectory of King's ministry was to go from a particularly American kind of conversation, U.S. conversation, to an international conversation. So we need to be on that trajectory as well. To the question about ballot box, stay tuned. We have more podcasts, more conversations about what to do all the way to 2020. These conversations, Women Talk God and others, are going to be up on our website at middlechurch.org, also at Spirit House Project, so you can talk to us. Sometimes it'll be look and listen. Sometimes it'll be talk to me, write me. But stay tuned for a weekly, we're going to start with twice a week, but then a weekly conversation where Ruby and I talk to each other, but also to other people, because we have got to make a different America, and we can. A different United States of America, and we can. Amanda, your announcement, and then we're going to close.
That was it also, just that Jacqui also does really routine Ask Me Anythings on Instagram at Rev Jacqui Lewis. And if you hop on those, Jacqui will answer them in video, and they're beautiful. And Ruby does similarly on Twitter, Ruby in Sales. So I can say personally that these women are gems and accessible to us, and it is a gift. And we are extremely grateful, and we can continue the conversation.
Can we give Jacqui a big hand for her visionary leadership?
I just want to be like you when I grow up.
We really, all of
I
this is
love you.
possible because of Jacqui's vision and her desire to expand the conversation, her willingness to let me ramble on and on.
And teach me, teach me. Which is to say, we are never through learning. So you are our teachers as well, right? These questions, the things that come up are our teachers as well. This is Women Talk God, a podcast for people of faith and people of no faith to talk about where is love in the world and how can we build a movement with it. I'd like anybody who has not given us their information, if you'd like to stay in touch with us, can we have some of those cards up here that people can fill out? Okay, we're going to grab those. Please fill out a card so we can have the talk you want to have. And thank you for coming.
Wait, before we go, can we say, I am worthy?
I am worthy.
I am worthy.
I am worthy.
I am worthy to become all of myself.
I am worthy to become all of myself.
I pledge to remove any stumbling block that reduce me to the smallest of my possibilities. I'm worthy. I am becoming. I am determined. I will be whole. Amen.
And I ain't going to let nobody turn me around. Stand up and sing the benediction, or sit and sing the benediction. Here we go.
Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land. Woo!
Ruby Sales, everybody! Thank you, Dion. Thank you, IBT. Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming. Give us your information.